The moment Theodore leaned in during the family greeting at the wedding and murmured, "Hey, soldier," Nathaniel knew the charade was over. His father's face twisted in rage as the truth about his secret gay love for the groom exploded across the sunlit vineyard in Texas. Captain Nathaniel Harlan stood rigid in his dress blues, the Texas sun beating down on the outdoor ceremony like a spotlight he'd spent 15 years dodging. The vineyard outside Austin had seemed perfect for his sister Emily's big day. White chairs in neat rows, wildflowers lining the aisle, the faint hum of country music from the string quartet. But now every eye was on him. Theodore Langston, the groom, had just finished the traditional receiving line ritual, shaking hands with each member of the Harlan clan. And when he reached Nathaniel, that single whispered phrase had sliced through the polite smiles like a blade. "Captain?" Theodore had said louder for the crowd, then softer, just for him, "Hey, soldier." It was their private code from 3 years ago, back when they'd met at a joint training exercise in Fort Hood. Nathaniel had been the rising star officer, Theodore the civilian contractor with a sharp wit and eyes that saw straight through the armor. One late-night conversation in a dimly lit officers' club had turned into stolen weekends in San Antonio, whispered promises, and a love Nathaniel had convinced himself he could bury once Theodore started dating Emily. Now the word hung in the air. Colonel Harlan Sr., retired, decorated, and as straight-laced as the creases in his own old uniform, froze mid-handshake with the bride's maid of honor. His bushy gray eyebrows shot up. "What did you just call my son?" The question cracked like a rifle shot. Guests shifted in their seats. Emily, radiant in lace, glanced between her new husband and her brother, confusion clouding her blue eyes. Nathaniel's heart hammered against his metals. He tried to laugh it off the way he'd laughed off every awkward question about why he never brought a date to family barbecues. "Old Army nickname, Dad. Theo and I worked together once. No big deal." But his voice cracked on the last word. Theodore's hand, still extended, trembled slightly. The groom's green eyes, those same eyes that had once looked at Nathaniel with nothing but tenderness, now held pure panic. Colonel Harlan stepped closer, voice low but carrying to the front rows. "Don't lie to me, boy." I saw the way he said it, like it meant something. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone's phone camera clicked. Nathaniel felt the familiar weight of his uniform turn suffocating. The same uniform that had protected him from questions for years. Don't ask, don't tell was long gone. But the invisible rules in his conservative military family had never changed. He had joined the army right out of college to make his father proud, to escape the small-town whispers about the quiet Harlan boy who never dated girls. Promotion after promotion, deployment after deployment, he'd built a wall so high no one could see the man behind it. Theodore had been the crack in that wall. Their affair had been brief, intense, and ended when Theodore announced he was serious about Emily. "I can't live like this anymore, Nate," he'd said in a rainy motel parking lot. "Your family, my career. People like us don't get the fairy tale." Nathaniel had nodded, swallowed the pain, and watched the man he loved walk toward his sister. Now that fairy tale was crumbling in real time. Emily tugged Theodore's sleeve. "Theo, what's going on?" Her voice trembled. Theodore opened his mouth, closed it, then looked straight at Nathaniel. There's something I should have told you a long time ago." Colonel Harlan's fist slammed the table holding the guest book. "Enough. We're not doing this here." But it was already too late. The damage was done. Nathaniel felt the stares like bullets. Pity from some cousins, disgust from aunts who had always pushed him toward nice church girls. His mother pressed a hand to her pearls, tears welling. In that single heartbeat, Captain Nathaniel Harlan, decorated officer, became the family scandal. He turned on his heel and walked away from the line, boots crunching on gravel, the vineyard blurring through sudden heat behind his eyes. Theodore called after him once, "Nate, wait!" But the word was swallowed by the rising chatter. Nathaniel kept moving until the tent was behind him, the happy music fading. He needed air. He needed to breathe without the weight of every lie pressing on his chest. Back at the edge of the vines, he loosened his tie and stared at the rolling hills. 15 years of service, 2 tours in the Middle East, countless nights questioning who he really was, and one whispered greeting had undone it all. The worst part of him was relieved. The secret had been eating him alive. But relief tasted like ash when he thought of Emily's face, his father's rage, and the career that could vanish with one well-placed rumor. Theodore appeared at the edge of the path, tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, face pale. "I didn't mean for that to happen," he said quietly. "I just saw you standing there and it slipped out." "Old habit." Nathaniel laughed bitterly. "Old habit. That's what we were? A habit." The words hurt more than he expected. Theodore stepped closer, the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and familiar, hitting Nathaniel like a memory. "You know it was more than that. But I chose this life because it was safe. For both of us. Safe." The word landed like a slap. Nathaniel had spent years convincing himself safe was enough. Now safe was shattered, and the pieces were cutting everyone he loved. He looked at Theodore, handsome, steady, the man who had once made him feel seen, and wondered if love was ever truly safe. The reception music swelled in the distance, but for Nathaniel, the party was over. He turned away again, voice rough. "Go back to your wife, Theo. I'll handle my family." But even as he said it, he knew nothing would ever be the same. The truth was out, and it demanded answers he wasn't sure he had the strength to give. Nathaniel drove the back roads of the Texas Hill Country with the windows down, letting the warm wind whip away the tears he refused to acknowledge. The rental car smelled of leather and regret. His phone buzzed nonstop, texts from cousins, missed calls from his mother, one terse voicemail from his father. "Come home and explain yourself like a man." He ignored them all. The sun dipped lower, painting the live oaks gold, but the beauty only reminded him of the vineyard he'd fled 2 hours earlier. By the time he pulled into the small motel on the outskirts of Austin, his dress uniform felt like a costume he no longer deserved. He stripped it off in the dim room, hanging the jacket carefully out of habit, then sat on the edge of the bed in boxers and a white undershirt. The mirror across the room showed a man who looked every inch the capable officer. Square jaw, short dark hair, broad shoulders from years of PT, but the eyes were haunted. He thought back to the night he and Theodore first crossed the line. It had been after a long day of simulations at Fort Hood. Theodore, then just a logistics consultant, had bought him a beer and listened when Nathaniel admitted how lonely the military life could be. "You don't have to carry it alone," Theodore had said, voice low. One thing led to another, and suddenly they were in Nathaniel's off-base apartment, hands and mouths learning secrets uniforms were meant to hide. For 6 months they stole every moment. Weekend drives to San Antonio, quiet dinners where no one knew them, late-night phone calls when deployments separated them. Nathaniel had never felt more alive. Then Emily entered the picture. She and Theodore met at a family barbecue Nathaniel had foolishly invited him to. Sparks flew, safe, public, heterosexual sparks. Theodore had pulled Nathaniel aside that night. "This could work for us. I date your sister. Keep the family off your back, and we figure it out." Nathaniel had agreed because the alternative, coming out to a father who still used slurs at Thanksgiving, felt impossible. So he watched the man he loved fall into a relationship with his sister, smiling through every holiday photo, every engagement announcement. The guilt had gnawed at him, but he told himself it was the price of survival. Now survival was a motel room and a half-empty minibar. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Theodore standing there, still in his tux, bow tie undone, eyes red. "Emily's with her friends. I told her I needed air. Can we talk?" Nathaniel stepped aside without a word. Theodore closed the door and leaned against it. "I never stopped loving you, Nate. Marrying Emily, I thought it would protect us both." "Protect you?" your career, your family's approval. But seeing you today in that uniform, standing so alone, I realized I was wrong. I hurt you. I hurt her. I hurt myself. Nathaniel sank onto the bed, head in hands. You think I don't know that? I stood there every Sunday dinner watching you kiss her cheek and wondering if you whispered, "Hey, soldier," to her too. The jealousy he'd buried for years spilled out raw. Theodore crossed the room and knelt in front of him, hands gentle on Nathaniel's knees. Never. It was always you. But I got scared. The military climate changed, but your father didn't. And I watched you climb ranks, knowing one rumor could end it all. They sat in silence, the air thick with years of unsaid things. Nathaniel finally looked up. What happens now? The whole family knows. Dad's probably already calling my commander. Theodore's face hardened with resolve. Then we face it. Together. I'll talk to Emily tonight. Tell her everything. She deserves the truth. Nathaniel wanted to believe it could be that simple. But the army had taught him nothing was simple when personal life collided with duty. He had a promotion board in 3 months. A deployment rotation coming up. One viral wedding video and his entire future could vanish. Yet looking at Theodore, still the same man who made him laugh until his sides hurt, he felt the first crack of hope. They talked until midnight. Theodore left with a promise to call in the morning. Nathaniel lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of his uniform across the chair feeling lighter somehow. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone with the secret. The humiliation at the wedding still burned, but beneath it something new stirred, determination. He would not let fear define him anymore. The next morning his phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice shook. Nathaniel, we need to talk. All 3 of us. Today. The conversation he'd dreaded for years was finally here. He dressed in civilian clothes, jeans and a simple button-down, and drove back toward the city, heart pounding but steady. Whatever came next, he would meet it as the man he truly was. The coffee shop on Congress Avenue smelled of fresh roast and tension. Nathaniel arrived first, claiming a corner table away from the windows. Emily walked in 10 minutes later, eyes puffy but determined, Theodore trailing a step behind. They sat without hugs. Emily folded her hands on the table like she was bracing for impact. Start from the beginning, she said quietly. Nathaniel took a breath and told her everything. The training exercise, the stolen months, the night Theodore chose the safer path. Theodore added details, voice steady but soft, never once looking away from Emily. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she surprised them both. I'm angry, hurt, but I'm not blind. I always felt something was missing with us. Theo. Like you were holding back a piece of yourself. She turned to Nathaniel. And you've carried this alone for so long. I wish you'd trusted me. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she reached across and squeezed his hand. You're still my brother. That doesn't change. The relief was so sharp Nathaniel had to look away. But the easy part was over. His father's call came that afternoon. My office. 1 hour. The Harlan family home in a quiet Austin suburb hadn't changed since Nathaniel's childhood. American flag on the porch, military photos lining the walls. Colonel Harlan waited behind his desk like it was an interrogation room. Explain how my son, an officer sworn to uphold the values of this country, could betray his own sister like this. Nathaniel stood at parade rest out of habit. I didn't betray her, sir. Theodore and I ended things before he ever dated Emily. The feelings, they didn't end. But I never acted on them after. His father's fist hit the desk. Feelings? This isn't about feelings. This is about honor. About the legacy I built for this family. You think the army will keep promoting a man whose personal life is tabloid fodder? One video from that wedding is already circulating on social media. He slid his phone across. The headline read, Military Family Wedding Drama, Brother and Groom's Shocking Secret. Nathaniel's stomach dropped. Colonel Harlan leaned forward. Fix this. Apologize to your sister publicly. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. Or don't expect a place at this table again. The ultimatum hung heavy. Nathaniel felt the old fear rise. Fear of losing the only approval he'd ever known. But something had shifted in the last 24 hours. He met his father's eyes. I can't lie anymore, Dad. I'm gay. I've always been gay. And I'm done pretending. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. His father's face went blank, then cold. Get out of my house. Nathaniel walked out without looking back, the flag on the porch suddenly feeling less like home and more like a reminder of everything he'd sacrificed. That night he met Theodore at a quiet park near the river. They sat on a bench under string lights, the Austin skyline glowing in the distance. Theodore's hand found his in the dark. Emily and I are getting an annulment. She's hurt, but she wants us both to be happy. Nathaniel squeezed back. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a minefield. Felt possible. Yet the military side loomed. His commander had left a voicemail requesting a meeting Monday morning. Nathaniel knew the questions would come about conduct, about perception, about whether his personal life affected his leadership. He had always excelled because he never gave anyone a reason to doubt him. Now doubt was everywhere. Theodore rested his head on Nathaniel's shoulder. Whatever happens, we face it together. No more hiding. Nathaniel nodded, the warmth of the contact chasing away the chill of his father's rejection. The road ahead would be long. Conversations with Emily, damage control at work, learning how to love openly after years of secrecy. But for the first time, he wasn't walking it alone. Monday morning at Fort Hood arrived with merciless Texas heat. Nathaniel adjusted his uniform in the mirror, the same dress blues that had witnessed his humiliation now carrying him into the commander's office. Colonel Ramirez looked up from a stack of papers, expression unreadable. Captain Harlan. Sit. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. No shouting, no immediate relief. Ramirez cited policy changes, the importance of unit cohesion, and the viral video that had already reached higher command. Your personal life is your business, Captain. But perception matters. Take 30 days of leave. Use it to get your house in order. We'll reassess after. It wasn't a discharge, but it wasn't support either. Nathaniel left the office feeling suspended between two worlds. Theodore waited outside in civilian clothes, leaning against his truck. How bad? Nathaniel exhaled. Leave. Not fired. Yet. They drove to the motel in silence, then spent the afternoon packing Nathaniel's few belongings. The decision came naturally. They would stay together in Theodore's small apartment in Austin while Nathaniel figured out next steps. Emily joined them for dinner that night, takeout tie on the tiny balcony. The conversation was raw but honest. She asked questions, cried, even laughed at old family stories. I always wondered why you two got along so well, she admitted. Now it makes sense. The forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was real. Nathaniel felt a piece of his heart mend. The real test came 2 weeks later when his mother called. Your father won't say it, but he's watching every news report about military policy. He's scared for you. Nathaniel drove to the house alone. His father was in the backyard tending roses, his one soft spot. They stood side by side in silence for 10 minutes before the older man spoke. I don't understand it, but I raised you to be a man of integrity. If this is who you are, then be the best at it. Just don't expect me to march in any parades. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't disownment. Nathaniel took it as the bridge it was. Meanwhile, Theodore and Nathaniel began rebuilding. Simple things. Grocery shopping together, morning runs along the river, quiet evenings where they talked about everything they'd hidden. Nathaniel started seeing a therapist recommended by a fellow officer who had come out years earlier. The sessions peeled back layers of shame he hadn't realized he carried. You spent your whole life performing, the therapist said. Now you get to live. The 30 days flew. Nathaniel returned to base with a new clarity. His team greeted him with quiet respect. A few even offered subtle support. The promotion board was postponed, but Ramirez pulled him aside. You handled this with dignity, Captain. Keep doing that. One evening Nathaniel stood on Theodore's balcony watching the city lights. Theodore slipped arms around him from behind. Proud of you, soldier. Nathaniel turned, kissed him softly. No fear of windows or neighbors. The humiliation at the wedding had been the catalyst. But this quiet, honest love was the reward. 6 months later the Austin sun felt different, warmer, freer. Nathaniel had made it through the promotion board. The new silver oak leaf on his collar felt earned in a way the old one never had. He and Theodore had moved into a small house with a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues. Emily came often, bringing her new boyfriend and slowly rebuilding trust. The family dinners were still awkward, but Colonel Harlan showed up each time, grumbling less with every visit. Nathaniel's unit knew the truth now. He had addressed them directly one morning. Formation. I'm the same officer you've always known. My personal life doesn't change my commitment to you. The response had been overwhelmingly supportive. A young lieutenant even pulled him aside later. Thank you, sir. Gives the rest of us courage. The word stayed with Nathaniel through every briefing, every field exercise. Yet the journey wasn't over. Old doubts surfaced during a temporary duty assignment in Washington. Theodore couldn't come, and the distance brought back old fears. Late-night calls helped, but Nathaniel still caught himself scanning rooms for judgment. One evening in a Pentagon corridor, he ran into an old mentor who had heard the story. Heard you made waves back home, Harlan. Proud of you. The simple validation nearly knocked him over. Back in Austin, Theodore planned a quiet anniversary dinner. 3 years since their first real date, counting past the wedding chaos. Candles on the table, the same playlist from their stolen weekends. Over dessert, Theodore slid a small box across. Inside was a simple silver band. Not asking for anything official yet. Just a promise that we keep choosing each other, no matter what. Nathaniel slipped it on, throat tight. I promise. The following weekend they drove to the vineyard where everything had exploded. The owner recognized them and offered a private tour. Standing in the same spot where the receiving line had formed, Nathaniel felt the last ghost of shame lift. He pulled Theodore close. Thank you for saying, hey, soldier. Best mistake you ever made. They laughed until tears came, then kissed under the same Texas sun that had once exposed them. Nathaniel's father called the next morning. Your mother wants you both over for Thanksgiving. Bring whatever dish you want. No questions asked. The invitation was small, but it meant everything. Nathaniel hung up and looked at Theodore across the kitchen. We're going home. The road had been brutal, betrayal, humiliation, career threats, family fractures. But every scar had led here. To a life where Nathaniel could stand tall in his uniform and hold the hand of the man he loved without hiding. The boy who once joined the army to hide was now the man who led by example. A year after the wedding that changed everything, Nathaniel stood on stage at a small military recognition ceremony in Fort Hood. The auditorium was packed with soldiers, families, and a few civilian guests. Theodore sat in the second row, smiling the same smile that had started it all. Colonel Ramirez pinned the next rank on Nathaniel's shoulder, Lieutenant Colonel Harlan now, and shook his hand firmly. Well done, Nate. You've shown us all what real leadership looks like. Later, at the reception, Nathaniel pulled Theodore aside under a flowering tree. Remember when one word almost ruined us? Theodore grinned. Best word I ever said. They stood quietly, hands linked, watching the sunset paint the sky the same gold as that fateful day. Nathaniel thought about the journey, the panic in the receiving line, the painful conversations, the slow rebuilding of family ties, the courage it took to face his command. Every step had been worth it. Emily and her new fiancé joined them, laughing about wedding planning do's and don'ts. Colonel Harlan and his wife arrived shortly after, the older man offering a stiff but genuine handshake to Theodore. "Treat my son right," he muttered. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Nathaniel felt the last piece of his old armor fall away. That night back home, Nathaniel stood on the porch looking at the stars. Theodore stepped out beside him. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel turned, pulling him close. "That I almost lost everything because I was afraid to be myself. Now I have more than I ever imagined." They kissed under the porch light. No fear, no secrets. The road ahead still held challenges, deployments, policy shifts, occasional sideways glances, but Nathaniel faced them as a whole man. The army had given him discipline. Theodore had given him courage. Together they had built something stronger than any uniform or family expectation. True or false? Living an authentic life always requires losing something valuable along the way.